Dune felt a cold sweat break out on his brow as he realized the gravity of the situation. Acheron raised a hand, and darkness coalesced around him, forming a wickedly curved staff adorned with ancient symbols. "Your time of plaguing this city is nigh," his voice filled with a chilling finality. Dune swallowed hard, but before he could say anything the blessing lunged, only to be stopped by a wall of ice. Dune could hardly believe his eyes as the ice and snow began to form a protective barrier around him. It swirled and twirled, encasing him in a shield of frost that shimmered with an ethereal glow. He could sense the immense power radiating from this icy defense, as if it were an ancient force awakened to protect him. Acheron's eyes narrowed, his expression turning from one of arrogance to one of curiosity. He swung his wicked staff with a thunderous force, attempting to shatter the ice barrier. But no matter how hard he struck, the ice remained unyielding, undamaged by his immense might. Dune's heart raced with a mix of awe and confusion. He had never possessed such powers, nor had he ever witnessed such a display of elemental mastery. Was it possible that he, too, harbored hidden abilities, awakened by some unknown force? As Acheron's attacks grew more furious, the ice barrier began to retaliate. Icy tendrils sprouted from its surface, wrapping around the blessing and constricting his movements. The frigid grip tightened, causing Acheron to gasp for breath, his powerful form suddenly dwarfed by the overwhelming strength of the ice. Dune watched in awe as Acheron's struggles grew weaker, his once confident demeanor replaced by desperation. The ice seemed to feed off his fear, growing stronger and more resolute with every passing moment. It was as if the natural world had risen up to protect its own, refusing to let darkness prevail. A chilling gust of wind swept through the area, carrying with it a whisper. Dune strained to hear, his senses heightened by the adrenaline coursing through his veins. It was a soft, demanding, and spoke in 1,000 different voices all at once. "Freeze, freeze until there is nothing left, freeze until they can't hurt you, until no one can hurt you." Dune realized that the voice came from the ice itself, from the very forces that had come to his aid. The whispers grew louder, swirling around him in a dance of icy particles. They urged him to take action, to harness his newfound power and destroy Acheron. The crowd below gasped and murmured in astonishment as they witnessed the seemingly impossible. A Nigen, a race often regarded as weak and powerless, stood before the mighty Acheron with a display of unyielding strength. Whispers of fear and disbelief spread through the onlookers, mingling with the sound of cracking ice and Acheron's desperate pleas for mercy. The icy tendrils held Acheron in their frozen grip. He extended his hand, calling upon his connection to the earth. The ground beneath him trembled, sending shockwaves through the frozen landscape. The very foundations of the battlefield shifted, causing cracks to appear in the ice and snow, threatening to destabilize Acheron's footing. A spark of realization flickered in Acheron's eyes as he recognized the source of Dune's newfound power. With a fierce roar, he summoned dark flames, engulfing his staff, and directing waves of searing heat towards Dune. But even the scorching fire seemed futile before the raw elemental force that surrounded the Nigen. In that moment something inside Dune snapped. He called upon the winds, urging them to whip and howl around him. Gusts of frigid air swept through, intertwining with the ice and forming a violent tempest. The combined might of ice and wind waged a relentless assault on Acheron, battering him with hailstones and piercing shards of ice. No longer able to withstand the onslaught, Acheron's resistance faltered. His aura of invincibility shattered like fragile glass, leaving only a broken, defeated figure. The ice and snow ceased their assault. As the adrenaline pumped through his veins, Dune's mind raced with possibilities. The power he had just unleashed was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. He had always believed in the strength of unity and resilience, but this newfound elemental force added a whole new dimension to their fight. Gathering the group in a secluded corner, Dune's voice carried a new sense of determination. "We've witnessed the power that lies within us," he proclaimed, his eyes burning with newfound purpose. "With this ability, we have the means to reclaim our home planet from the clutches of those fucking demons." The others would agree, however June and Go held doubts due to fears of making things worse for themselves if things go wrong. Meanwhile, while confused on how such a thing was even possible, was a 100% on board. However, unknown to them as the news of Acheron's defeat spread throughout the city, panic and chaos erupted among the Bandani people. For centuries, they had believed themselves to be the chosen ones, gifted with special powers by their god. The realization that there were others, outsiders who had gained similar abilities, shattered their beliefs to their very core. Families were torn apart as loved ones questioned their faith and loyalty. The once powerful and confident Bandani leaders were now faced with the reality of the situation. Dr. Orion was led out of the council chamber and into the center of the city, where a sizable crowd had gathered. News of his actions and the consequences had spread like wildfire, and the Bandani people wanted answers. They demanded justice for their shattered beliefs and the chaos that now enveloped their lives. As Dr. Orion stepped onto a raised platform, the clamor of the crowd grew louder. He could feel their anger, confusion, and fear pressing in on him from all sides. The weight of their expectations and the weight of his own guilt threatened to consume him. Standing before the multitude, Dr. Orion took a deep breath, summoning all his courage. "People of Bandhan," he began, his voice steady but filled with remorse. "I stand here before you today to accept responsibility for the calamity that has befallen our city." A murmur ran through the crowd as they listened intently to his words. Dr. Orion continued, his voice projected by a magic-enhanced amplifier to reach every corner of the gathering. "I acted out of curiosity and a sincere desire to advance our understanding of the supernatural. But I failed to foresee the consequences of my actions." He looked into the eyes of the Bandani people, searching for forgiveness. "I am haunted by the destruction that has befallen our city and the shattered faith that now plagues our hearts. I vow to do everything in my power to right my wrongs and help restore the balance we have lost." The crowd remained silent, their expressions a mixture of anger, confusion, and skepticism. One voice broke through the tension and echoed across the square. It was an elderly woman, her voice filled with sadness and longing. "How can we trust you? Our whole way of life has been shattered." Dr. Orion bowed his head in acknowledgement. "I understand your doubts, and I don't expect your forgiveness right away. Trust must be earned, and I am ready to work tirelessly to rebuild what has been broken." The elderly woman's words resonated with the crowd, and a wave of agreement rippled through the gathering. It seemed that forgiveness was not yet within their reach. The tension in the air grew thicker, as the crowd's anger intensified. They demanded justice, wanting to see Dr. Orion pay for his actions. They demanded a severe punishment, not only as retribution for the destruction caused but also as a deterrent to prevent others from making similar mistakes. The city council, hearing the fervor of the crowd, convened an emergency session to address the situation. After deliberation, they reached a decision. Dr. Orion was to be held accountable for his actions and was stripped all of his titles before being sentenced to death on the spot. In response, the former scientist hung his head before being laid out, listening to his name being chanted with the venom of a poisonous snake. Dr. Orion sat alone in his dimly lit cell, the weight of his guilt pressing heavily upon him. The solitude provided ample time for reflection, and the memories of his past mistake haunted him with every passing moment. As he stared at the cold, stone walls, his mind replayed the disastrous events that led to his downfall. He could still see the chaotic aftermath of his ill-fated experiment, the destruction and suffering he had caused. Regret washed over him like an unrelenting wave, leaving him gasping for air. Unfortunately, it was for naught, especially when the guards came into his cell before grabbing him. Dr. Orion was led to the gallows, his hands bound and his head held high. The crowd of onlookers jeered and shouted insults as he was marched to his fate. He could feel the eyes of the judge and jury burning into him as he stood beneath the noose. The executioner placed the rope around his neck and tightened the knot. Dr. Orion closed his eyes and said a silent prayer as the lever was pulled and the trapdoor opened beneath him. The crowd erupted into a frenzy as Dr. Orion's body dropped through the trapdoor. His neck snapped with a sickening crack, and his lifeless body swayed in the wind. Blood trickled from his mouth and nose, and his eyes bulged from their sockets. The smell of death hung heavy in the air, and the onlookers watched in morbid fascination as the doctor's body slowly stopped swinging. "Give me something brutal." As the lifeless body of Dr. Orion dangled from the noose, his once dignified appearance became a haunting spectacle of brutality. The force of the drop had crushed his larynx, making his final gasps for air a grotesque symphony of gurgles. Dark crimson streams oozed from his ears, mixing with the blood staining his disheveled hair. The merciless wind toyed with his limp limbs, forcing them to sway violently, as if mocking the remnants of life that had clung to him just moments ago. Tattered remnants of his clothing flapped like vengeful flags, urging the witnesses to bear witness to their complicity in this brutal spectacle. The sight of his swollen, bulging eyes served as a sinister reminder of the immense pain he had endured. They glared outwards, almost accusingly, as if begging each onlooker to comprehend the magnitude of their collective decision. A chilling silence enveloped the gathering, with only the distant echoes of horrified gasps and nervous shuffling punctuating the air. A sickening stench of death mingled with the hot, oppressive atmosphere, adding to the grim ambiance. It crept into the nostrils of those present, settling into their lungs like a putrid fog, a macabre reminder of the inescapable fate that awaited them all. And so, the fascinated crowd stood, their morbid curiosity imprisoning them in a mire of horror and revulsion. They watched as the cadaverous form of Dr. Orion eventually succumbed to stillness, his lifeless body ceasing its macabre dance, only to be forever etched into their memories as a testament to the brutal depths of what cruelty truly is. As Dune drifted into a deep slumber, their mind became a gateway to a chilling nightmare, a surreal realm governed by their newfound powers of ice and snow. The dream scene emerged as a haunting nightmarish landscape, a macabre winter wonderland of horror and despair. Dune found himself standing alone amidst a desolate, frozen wasteland, a realm dominated by an eternal blizzard. The howling wind lashed against their face, carrying with it an icy bite that seeped into his very bones. In this frozen darkness, the air was heavy with an otherworldly silence, one that made Dune's heart race with unease. As he glanced around, Dune noticed gnarled, skeletal trees stretching out their twisted branches like bony fingers grasping for escape from this desolation. The trees, devoid of any signs of life, were encrusted with a thick layer of ice and snow, transforming them into menacing specters. The ground beneath Dune's feet revealed itself as a treacherous slab of jagged, ice-covered rocks. Each step he took sent shards of sharp ice digging into their boots, causing pain to jolt through their body. The ground crackled with an eerie sound, as if whispering ancient secrets that should have stayed buried. The world seemed trapped in a perpetual twilight, with a dim, haunted blue hue casting an eerie glow over the landscape. It was an ethereal light that made shadows dance on the frozen terrain, creating illusions that seemed to slither and writhe with sinister intent. As Dune wandered deeper into this waking nightmare, the temperature plummeted even further. Frostbite threatened to consume their fingers, turning them a sickly shade of gray. Each breath became a visible puff of white vapor, a stark reminder of their vulnerability in this nightmarish realm. Suddenly, figures appeared in the distance, shrouded in swirling mist and cloaked in darkness. Their movements were slow and deliberate, yet there was a sense of impending malevolence emanating from them. As Dune tried to approach, the figures vanished, leaving behind nothing but a chilling laughter that echoed through the air. Beyond his reach, a towering ice castle materialized, standing as a foreboding symbol of dread. Its grandeur betrayed the horrors concealed within its icy walls. Dune felt a curious pull toward it, an instinct that drew him closer, even as their hearts screamed for them to run. As they stepped through the ice-cold gates, the castle seemed to trap them inside its icy grip. Within the castle's labyrinthine corridors, an even colder darkness descended upon Dune. The walls dripped with frozen tears, echoing their anguish. The floor seemed to come alive, shifting beneath their feet as if icy tendrils were reaching up from the depths, threatening to hem them down into eternal frost. In each room he entered, visions of their deepest fears manifested. Shadows danced along the walls, taking the form of grotesque creatures with icicle-like fangs. Whispers filled his ears, taunting and tormenting him with horrifying images of loved ones lost. Finally, as dawn approached, Dune was jolted awake. his body drenched in a cold sweat, heart pounding with a mix of terror and relief. Dune's nightmare had left him feeling restless and unsettled. As he tried to regain his composure, he took a deep breath and glanced at his surroundings. The trio was back at their makeshift camp, surrounded by the remnants of their previous night's fire. "You all right, bro?" Geo asked, concern evident in her voice. Dune tried to shake off the lingering unease, offering Geo a small nod. "Yeah, just a bad dream. Nothing to worry about." Eve, who sat on a log nearby, removed her glasses and peered at Dune intently. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced by a touch of worry. "You've been having these nightmares quite often lately. Maybe it's time we talk about it." Dune hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether or not he should confide in them about his dreams. He had recently discovered some newfound abilities, powers tied to ice, but he hadn't shared the details with anyone yet. The nightmares seemed to be connected somehow, but he couldn't piece together the puzzle. June, often quiet and observant, moved closer to Dune and rested a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was comforting, a small reminder that they faced the world together. "We'll have your back, Dune. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." Dune managed a faint smile. Eileen's close, her shoulder brushing against his. She gazed at him with a mixture of concern and something deeper, a connection that seemed to transcend their shared experiences. "We'll find a way to help you, Dune," E whispered softly, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "I'll do everything in my power to protect you." Dune met her gaze, sensing the sincerity and genuine care in her words. His heart fluttered, unsure of how to respond to the blossoming affection. But in that moment, he found solace in E's unwavering support. "Thank you." The great